the kind of skills that the learners that you work with are drawing on every day, you know, making some of, for example, the wonderful machinima that Britta just showed us in her previous session, and that I know that Global Kids do some fantastic work around that. And so these young children are also developing these kinds of skills in places like Club Penguin. So I draw from New Literacy Studies, and this emphasises literacy as a social practice. So literacy as it's socially constructed between these users of Club Penguin. And also draw on work from Claire Stewart, Lancashire and Nabel, and others who talk about the way in which communication in a new media age, it no longer privileges the written word, but you know, in fact, you know, decoding and encoding letters and words is necessary, as we know. We need to be able to read print, but it's no longer sufficient for communication. And therefore, as schools, we need to be focusing on enabling children to become competent navigators of this sort of multimedia, multimodal landscape. So that's the justification for this study. So I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so just as a background to this study, it's really framed by a number of discourses that I think are really prevalent in any research on young children's literacy practices. And first of all, we've got a range of evidence now that young children engage in technological practices from birth. And so, for example, I was involved in a study titled Digital Beginnings in the UK that looked at digital literacy practices of children aged from birth to 6, over 1,800 children. And the findings were very similar to the Kaiser Family Foundation study in the US, 0 to 6, that children are growing up from birth competent in a whole range of technologies. That's not to say that children are the digital natives that are often assumed. We found that a significant minority of children still had limited access to some technologies, and whilst this was equated to socioeconomic status, other factors came into play, such as family use of literacy. You know, for example, some of the middle-class children that we looked at, for example, couldn't get access to family technology because parents were using it for work purposes. So I thought those kinds of patterns were quite interesting in relation to looking at who are the digital insiders and who are the outsiders. Okay, so I see my box has disappeared. I'll wait until I pause before I put it back out again, if that's okay. I don't think I can multitask that much today. Okay, so despite this evidence that there is a range of, or even perhaps because of it, that children are engaged in technologies, there's been a range of moral panics. So in the UK, children are variously described as either sort of being obese, or having attention deficit disorder, or being prone to violence, or having a lack of social skills and so on, because of their engagement with the media. And indeed, a few years ago in Scotland, we had a report, I don't know if you heard this, of some research that indicated that children were being born with bigger thumbs, a kind of Darwinian effect of the use of PlayStations. So I know that these, I mean, you know, the jury's out on whether that's actually the case or not. You know, I guess it's conceivable. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see whether that actually is the case. So I think these kinds of moral panics are also the case in other countries, and I know that in the US you had the American Academy of Pediatrics, for example. They talked about banning television for children under 2. So this is the context in which work in this area is carried out. And whilst there's, you know, burgeoning research on Web 2 practices, including social network sites, these often overlook the interests of young children. And I think this maybe is, again, to do with the fact that there's some panic from some early educators around the notion of real and virtual. You know, for example, many early educators express anxiety about children's use of virtual worlds, as if their engagement in virtual worlds will somehow divorce them from the offline world around them, ignoring the fact that actually online and offline practices are a continuum, and there's blurring across the boundaries, as been indicated in work with older children and adults. So, whilst these moral panics sort of underpin this area, I think that we may find that there is a sort of lack of attention to online practices of our youngest children. Yet, I would argue that this is an important group to look at, because this is the generation that we'll be teaching in a few years' time, as I've said, and we need to look at where they're coming from. And there has been a notable increase in children's engagement in virtual worlds in the last couple of years. So, for example, I don't know if you know the K0 website. It's a really useful website. It sort of collects data on use of virtual worlds, and they say that there's over 150 worlds in operation or development for the under 18 age group. So today, the virtual world I'm going to be focusing on is Club Penguin, and that's said to have in excess of 22 million registered users. And I'm focusing on this virtual world as it was the most popular in the survey that I conducted in a primary school in Sheffield. Someone's asked what the slide seconds, how many seconds between each slide. That will differ. I guess sometimes it will be a minute, sometimes a couple of minutes. I hope that's okay. I will now go to my inventory and get out the, as I move the slide, get out the box again, if I can find it. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the study and then about Club Penguin, and then I'll stop for questions. So the background to this study was that I undertook it in a primary school in Sheffield. It's a primary school that serves primarily a white working class community, and we developed an online survey on Club Penguin, on Google Docs, that children completed, and this asked them about their use of technology in general, the use of the internet in general, and 175 children aged 5 to 11 completed that, and we helped the younger children, the 5 and 6 year olds, so that they were able to complete the survey where necessary. And of that survey, over half of the children, 52% of the children, stated that they use virtual worlds on a regular basis. Now, I'm often asked how generalizable that is, and I would say, this is a small sample, and it's therefore, I wouldn't like to say that it would be generalizable beyond this community. And also, I think, with these use of virtual worlds in schools, we have found that they are viral, that once one group of children start to use them, then it spreads to other groups of children. And so I guess, within one community you might find groups of schools where virtual worlds are used extensively and some where they're not used as extensively, if it's up to the children to disseminate their use. But of this school, just over half use them on a regular basis, and that was right across the age group. I interviewed some children in greater depth, 15 children, and then I filmed children for a month, three 11-year-olds, two girls and a boy, and I filmed over the shoulders using Club Penguin for the time they logged on to the time they logged off, and I talked to children about what they were doing and analysed just over 8 hours of video from that process, and then interviewed those 3 children and parents in depth. So the study was therefore varied in terms of methods used, which I think is necessary in looking at children's use of virtual worlds.